Coming up on Bridge City News, Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman speaks about the recent COVID-19 outbreak in our city and how the AHS now has us on a watch list. More restrictions have been implemented in Saskatchewan as that province deals with a coronavirus outbreak. And we hear about a powerful outreach which will impact close to 50 countries in Africa next month called One God, One Day, One Africa.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Health Services has placed the city of Lethbridge under a COVID-19 watch due to the increase of cases in our region. We now have 112 active cases in Lethbridge. There's an outbreak at the Cavendish Farms potato processing plant where 10 people have contracted the virus. According to a written statement, all infected employees are now self-isolating and all potentially affected employees have been notified and are also self-isolating. The first 5 cases were reported on October the 10th. According to the Director of Operations, Lee Gleim, the plant has undergone a plant maintenance shutdown last Friday and will remain closed until October the 19th. All employees have been encouraged to get tested. The plant has undergone a full sanitization and disinfection. The novel coronavirus has also impacted schools in our region. The Lethbridge School Division is reporting cases at various schools, including Lethbridge Collegiate, Lakeview Elementary, Fleetwood Bodden, Agnes Davidson, and Victoria Park High School. COVID-19 cases have also been reported at schools within the Holy Spirit Catholic School Division. An outbreak was declared at St. Francis Junior High School in Lethbridge. Now, it's not believed to be an instance of an in-school transmission. There's also a single active case reported at Ecole St. Mary Elementary School. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman spoke about the increase of COVID-19 cases in our city and the importance about protecting those who are most vulnerable.
We need to remember that 3% of the population has compromised immune systems. And the last census indicated 16.9% of Lethbridge residents were aged 65 and over. So we can say with reasonable confidence that at least 17,000 residents of the city of Lethbridge are in the most vulnerable categories when it comes to COVID-19. Let's make sure we keep each other safe.
The number of active coronavirus cases has also grown in Lethbridge County. There have been 11 more over the past 5 days for a total of 45, which is also under official watch status from Alberta Health Services. Across the province, there are 2,615 active cases, including 177 here in the South Zone. The Edmonton zone still leads the way with 1,473. There are 791 in the Calgary zone. Alberta Health Services says a small number of staff who work in the emergency department of the University of Alberta Hospital have tested positive for COVID-19. Officials are not, however, declaring it an outbreak. A statement from AHS says there have been no apparent links between the cases at the hospital, so it does not fit the criteria of an outbreak. Officials say no patients have been exposed or infected as a result of the cases. Alberta Health Services is launching a service to improve patient outcomes for Indigenous people in southwestern Alberta. The initiative, called the Indigenous Patient Navigation Service, will also address health inequalities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous populations.
My hope is in the future that it will create more opportunities, maybe some that we're not familiar with or known right now. But the Navigator is that first step to really engage, I think, with peoples, Indigenous peoples and patients, and communicate with healthcare providers, look at where those gaps are, see how we can help strengthen care and enhance care that's currently being given.
In our early evaluations of the work we've done together, we did do some assessment of how people are feeling about the project so far, and there's a huge cohort of people working on this from inner city, the nations, First Nations, Inuit and Métis, and they've said this is the single biggest, best collaboration they've done in the history of Alberta Health Services in the South Zone.
Health officials say the new initiative will also lead the way to more culturally sensitive health care in Alberta. Saskatchewan appears to be seeing a second wave of the novel coronavirus. There have been over 140 new cases reported since last Friday. The province's Chief Medical Officer of Health has restricted the maximum number of people allowed to get together inside from 30 down to 15. He says his province has seen a dramatic spike recently, with many infections tied to public and private gatherings.
While community transmission has been relatively low in Saskatchewan, we are seeing how quickly and easily this can change. Cases from early in the pandemic were largely linked to international travel. As international travel decreased, transmission shifted to interprovincial travel and then increasingly to gatherings. Gatherings are now increasing as a risk as the weather cools. Cases with contact to a known case or mass gathering are increasing from 53% in the first week of October to 70% this past week.
Meanwhile, Canada's two most populated provinces are now reporting a combined 1,924 new COVID-19 cases today. The 721 were reported in Ontario, with the majority of the patients under the age of 60. The other 1,203 are in Quebec, which is also reporting 5 additional deaths from the novel coronavirus. The University of Lethbridge says donors helped it launch a new emergency bursary to help students through the COVID-19 pandemic. Officials say many students lost part-time jobs, making rent, or putting food on the table. A call went out to the university community to throw its support behind the new fund, along with the International Student Bursary. The school says the call was answered by 121 donors combined to raise just over $28,000 for the two funds, which will assist 21 students. A new study by the National Rent Report and Rentals.ca says the average rent in Canada has come down 9.5% from last year, but in Lethbridge, rent has actually gone up 1.2% for a one-bedroom and 0.2% for a two-bedroom. The average cost for a one-bedroom apartment in our city is $956 and $1,087 for a two-bedroom. In Calgary, the average for a one-bedroom was $1,195 and $1,476 for a two-bedroom. Edmonton was more affordable at $1,038 for a one-bedroom and $1,270 for a two-bedroom. Vancouver posted the highest average annual rent for apartments and condos at $2,249, followed by Toronto at $2,158. Now, the most bizarre stats were for Montreal, where condo rents were down 17%, but the average rental for an apartment was up 20% for the year. With winter just around the corner, many are preparing to bundle up, including those who are most vulnerable in our community, who rely on the generosity of others to keep warm. The Salvation Army's winter coat drive has begun. Now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, things will look a little bit different this year.
The winter coat drive has gone on for many, many years amongst many different organizations. The Salvation Army has always cared for people in the most basic of ways, so a coat drive is a very natural fit for us, right? And so we're talking about coats, we're talking about toques and, hats, mitts, scarves, anything that would really help to keep people warm over the winter. God has called me to love people in simple ways, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, but putting a coat on a child's back or a pair of mittens on a child's hands to keep them warm in the winter, you can't get any more practical than that. And so we do it as a means of showing Christ's love to community and the love that we have as individuals for each other. I mean, that's how community works, and that's how it should be.
Bladen says donations can be dropped off at the back door of their office, located at 1302 4th Avenue South in Lethbridge, weekdays between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. This is the time of year when many people consider getting the flu shot. Now, this year, Lethbridge Soup Kitchen has teamed up with the folks at the Medicine Shop Pharmacy to offer flu shots in our city. Loris Alexander has the details.
Flu season is here. And in a year when we're already dealing with a pandemic, this could be a big challenge. That's why this local pharmacist is thinking about the less fortunate.
This year we decided to organize the flu shots to vulnerable populations like our homeless neighbors and also the shelters too. Because thing is that nobody approached them before and they are more like left out, and especially right now with the COVID, they are at a higher risk. So we just wanted to give them a first priority over anybody else.
We like all forms of collaboration. When we have local businesses that step up and say, what can we do to help those that are in need, in particular our homeless neighbors. We do know that our guests are likely more vulnerable than many other people, based on the lifestyle and based on the fact that they're outside a lot more than you and I. They don't often get the opportunity, because if they were to go into a regular place with a flu shot, they probably would be frowned upon because they don't look as they should, perhaps. And so just having this opportunity to bring it right to our setting at the Soup Kitchen, make it available for them, not only them, but our many volunteers, our staff, and anyone else in the neighborhood that wishes to come.
The flu shot drive will take place on Monday, October 19th from 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. with no appointment necessary. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Beautiful Cameron Lake in Waterton Lakes National Park has reopened to the public. As Mike Quinn explains, Waterton has been rebuilding since the Keno wildfire in 2017, resulting in the roads of the Akamina Parkway finally reopening to tourists.
If you take a trip to the Akamina Parkway in Waterton Lakes National Park, you'll notice Cameron Lake at the far end, featuring some beautiful scenery.
A lot of people, of course, who hadn't driven there for quite some time were anxious to get there and have a look. The Cameron Lake area is a beautiful lake, and the drive there is very scenic, so it's quite popular. We're anticipating that anytime the weather permits, that it will still be a popular drive.
Road access to Cameron Lake has been reopened since October 1st, and just behind me, you'll see the aftermath of the 2017 Keno wildfire.
The Keno wildfire had affected about 39% of the park, so it was quite significant. There was quite a bit of work to be done since the Keno wildfire, and that's why it's been that long getting it done. There was a lot of work, extra work. We already had slated to do some road work on that, the Akamina Parkway leading to Cameron Lake, but because of the Keno wildfire, there was a bunch of other considerations.
Marshall says Parks Canada has mitigated the dangers that came on the road from the 2017 Keno wildfire.
Certainly there are always risks when you get into the backcountry, so we want people to be aware of that. It's a very narrow road. You need to drive slowly, a 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. There's wildlife, cyclists, hikers, lots of things like that, and especially weather. And now that the snow will come, they really need to be careful when they're on the road.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A group pushing for the twinning of a Southern Alberta highway has come out with new priorities. The president of the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association says he's thankful that Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has committed $150 million to twin the stretch of road between Taber and Burdett, but much more needs to be done. Bill Chapman says a large portion of the Highway 3 needs twinning to support our agriculture industry and to keep Albertans safe.
The priorities stretching from Medicine Hat all the way to the BC border are really important because of agriculture, because of the windmill projects that are being constructed in our area, because of tourism and recreation. And of course, the Piikani Nation, as well as part of that whole corridor, is really important. So we need to complete that section through a functional planning study first before we can get started anywhere else. So the Grassy Mountain Coal Project, which will be out in the west, is really an important part to the economy, to jobs, and also part of the transportation corridor for Southern Alberta. The windmill projects, as well as I've said before, agriculture is really important. And finally, I'd like to say that we do have a petition on our website at twin3.ca. Sign that petition. It really means a lot to get those signatures into our government.
Chapman says twinning a larger portion of the highway will ensure safety for truckers, farmers, and tourists in Southern Alberta. The Western Hockey League announced today that the opening day for the 2020-2021 season will be Friday, January the 8th. Mark that down on the calendar. The league is working with governments and health authorities to obtain the necessary approvals to commence play. Details regarding the schedule of games for each of the 4 divisions will be announced at a later date. The league also announced today the hiring of Dr. Darren Naidoo, the head team physician for the Edmonton Oilers. Dr. Naidoo will become the league's chief medical health officer. He will help with the implementation of health and safety protocol for the WHL. The BC provincial election is coming up on October the 24th. Will Joe Horgan and the NDP return to power, or will it be the BC Liberals, who many view as more of a centrist party? BC Liberal leader Andrew Wilkinson's announced his party's platform, which includes a new economic recovery plan. It includes the elimination of the provincial sales tax for 1 year and the opening of the public auto insurer to competition. Wilkinson says British Columbians need financial help now and more jobs.
We need a British Columbia that creates opportunity for everyone, that does not ever divide British Columbians into friends and enemies of the NDP. That's just plain wrong. We believe in getting everybody's life in better shape once we get through COVID. We need to create jobs in every part of our province. We need to get people back to work and attract new investment from both within and outside British Columbia, which is something the NDP never seemed to find the time to talk about.
The U.S. presidential election is just over 2 weeks away now. Many Democrats have accused President Trump of being racist. Well, 3 supporters of Trump sat down to explain why they're supporting the president. As we hear in this next story, they know their opinions may be in the minority within their community.
Shrimp and grits met with a side of political conversation.
There's a modicum of truth to that unicorn thing.
At this lunch table in Charlotte, North Carolina, there's unabashed support for President Donald Trump.
So he's delivered on quite a few of the promises that he's made, but nobody wants to admit that.
According to the Pew Research Center, in 2016, 81% of black male voters cast their ballot for Hillary Clinton. For black women, that number rose to 98%.
I think when I would debate students on campus, they would definitely listen.
In this battleground state, Dayla Frazier wishes the Republican Party would do more to reach out to black communities.
I've never seen anyone from the right come to my community door, knock on my door, and explain to me anything.
Trump has faced criticism for repeatedly saying he's done more for black Americans than any other president, but these three agree.
You'll have to explain to me why, as a racist, he would provide historical levels of funding for historically black colleges and universities. You'll have to explain to me opportunity zones. I never heard a word about Donald Trump being racist until he came down the escalator.
Being black supporters of President Trump, they're used to getting a double take. This time was no different, as a young couple who asked to stay off camera pulled up their chairs to listen.
I've never seen 3 black Republicans. Never in my life.
And also debate.
He got kids in cages. I cannot agree with that on any level.
You're here, I'm here. Let's talk about the differences on why you believe this way, I believe here.
Just weeks from Election Day, this group is banking on another 4 years. Sarah Blake Morgan, The Associated Press.
Democratic challenger Joe Biden continued down the campaign trail with a stop in Florida. He says many seniors in the United States are frustrated with Donald Trump and his handling of the novel coronavirus.
Folks, Donald Trump's chaotic and divisive leadership has cost us far too much. 215,000 dead from COVID-19 and rising. Experts say we'll lose nearly another 200,000 lives in the next few months unless he fundamentally changed course. You know, I prayed for his recovery when he got COVID. And I'd hoped at least he'd come out of it somewhat chastened. But what has he done? He's just doubled down on the misinformation he did before and making it worse.
A TV news crew on the outskirts of Houston, Texas, was able to capture incredible footage of a large fire that could be seen for miles in the southeastern part of the state. The blaze began yesterday morning at a complex near Katy, Texas, that officials say was under construction. One firefighter was taken to hospital for heat exhaustion. There were no other reported injuries. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. There's a very large event coming up next month called One God, One Day, One Africa. It's an evangelistic outreach involving close to 50 countries in Africa. Jennifer Wild is involved in the event, and she says it all began for her when she received a vision from God way back in 1980.
He gave me a vision, and it was a vision of multi-millions of people, as far as the eye could see, receiving Jesus as their Lord and Savior all at one time. And you know, back then there was no internet, no phone, no nothing. It was impossible to do something like that. But I just believed him. I just believed everything, and I said, okay, you know, I started praying about it.
Catch the full interview with Jennifer discussing what it takes to coordinate One God, One Day, One Africa coming up in the second half of our show. Despite a recent ceasefire, the battle between two former Soviet states continues. Shelling can be heard along the southern front as forces from both Armenia and Azerbaijan continue to try and gain the upper hand. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says sadly, within this conflict, civilians and churches are most at risk.
Is nothing sacred anymore. This is a discrepancy over what they are calling occupied land. Of course, we've seen this all throughout the Middle East, but in this case, you know, this is something that's it's relatively new. There was a ceasefire in place. I mean, can't they resolve this using diplomatic means rather than going after, you know, again, churches, civilian areas, civilians, children, people who are going to worship, etc.
Catch the entire interview with Lisa Daftari, as she will also discuss why the Vatican is under fire right now. That's coming up later in our program. The French government has declared a public health state of emergency as COVID-19 cases continue to surge there. This will give officials more power to impose new lockdown measures to contain the spread of the virus. French media is reporting that one of the measures being considered is a nationwide curfew between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. The French government previously declared a public health state of emergency last March when COVID-19 was at its peak. France has reported just over 33,000 deaths from the novel coronavirus. The country currently has over 670,000 active cases. We woke up to a bit of a snowy day here in Lethbridge, lots of moisture in many parts of the city with a little bit of dusting. More clouds and moisture is on the way. A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. We had some light snow in parts of southwestern Alberta today, as many areas of Lethbridge received a light dusting. More flurries mixed with rain is in the forecast. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a look at the long-range forecast and tomorrow's national temperatures.
Mainly cloudy this evening with a 30% chance of flurries or rain showers, a low of -1 overnight. Mainly cloudy tomorrow, but clearing in the afternoon, high near 6 degrees. For Friday, periods of rain with lots of wind and high of 9 degrees. Saturday, cloudy with 70% chance of flurries or rain showers, high of 3 degrees. Sunday, snow or rain, high +4. And Monday, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 4 degrees. Tuesday, also a mix of sun and cloud with a high near 6. Our almanac tells us that the average high this time of year should be around 15 degrees. We're much lower than that these days. Average lows, 1 degree. Our high temperature on this day was in 1961. It was 27 degrees. Our low temperature was -7 in 1966. The sun rose this morning at 7:52 a.m. and our sunset right at 6:43 p.m. Looking to the national forecast for our highs tomorrow, Victoria with a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 13 degrees. They could see some rains tomorrow night. Vancouver, high of 14 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. 60% chance of flurries in Edmonton tomorrow with a high of 4 degrees and a high of 3 in Calgary with lots of sunshine. Mix of sun and cloud expected in Saskatoon with a high of 3. That 3 also expected to be the high in Regina with lots of sunshine, and a high of 4 is expected in Winnipeg with a mix of sun and cloud. Toronto and Ottawa could see a 60% chance of showers with a mix of sun and cloud in Montreal. All three of those regions, 18 degrees is their high. Over in Atlantic Canada, not bad at all. Lots of sunshine expected in Fredericton, high of 16, high 17 in Halifax under sunny skies, and sunshine also expected in Charlottetown tomorrow with a high of 15 degrees. St. John's, Newfoundland could expect some showers or drizzle, up to 5 millimeters of that, and 15 degrees is their high.
The parent company of Tim Hortons, Burger King, and Popeyes says third quarter sales were down 5.4% in the third quarter compared to 2019. Company officials with Restaurant Brands International is estimating adjusted earnings from $602 million to around $565 million US. The estimate for revenue is between $1.32 and $1.34 billion compared to $1.46 billion in the third quarter of last year. The estimates come as 96% of the company's restaurants were open in September. WestJet is removing around 80% of its seat capacity from the Atlantic region. The airline has suspended flights to Charlottetown, Fredericton, Moncton, and Sydney in Nova Scotia. Flights between Toronto and Quebec City are also being halted, while service to Halifax and St. John's, Newfoundland are being significantly reduced. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit the airline industry very hard, with companies like WestJet losing billions of dollars. The airline has also laid off more than 6,500 people since the start of the pandemic. The World Bank has approved $12 billion in financing to help developing countries buy and distribute coronavirus vaccines, tests, and treatments. The bank says its aim is to support around 1 billion people and to signal to the pharmaceutical industry that people in poor countries need access to safe and effective vaccines. It's part of a wider package of up to $160 billion to help developing countries fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The markets were down again as many industries are still waiting for more government stimulus. The TSX was down 55 points on the day to 16,455. The Dow was down 165 points to 28,514. The S&P 500 was down 23 points to 3488, and the Nasdaq was down 95 points to 11,768. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 91 cents to 41.11 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 21 cents to 2.65. Gold was up a cent to 19.01 US an ounce, and silver was unchanged on the day at 24.26 US an ounce. Wheat is at $260 per metric ton, barley's at $250, canola's at $5.25, and corn is at $268 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 95 cents to $110.28, Feeder cattle were down 50 cents to 136.33, and lean hogs were up 2.28 to 68.43. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 76.06 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Health Services has placed the City of Lethbridge under a COVID-19 watch due to the increase in coronavirus cases in our region. Over the past 5 days, there have been an increase of 52 cases for a total of 101 active. There's also an outbreak at the Cavendish Farms potato processing plant where 10 people have contracted the virus. According to a written statement, all infected employees are now self-isolating. Churches are under attack in 2 former Soviet states. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have the latest on the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Details are coming up. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Bikers Building Bridges is hosting their 2nd annual Halloween drive-through trunk or treat, taking place at Exhibition Park's north parking lot on Halloween night going from 5:30 to 9 p.m. Come out for a spooky good time, decorate your vehicle, and hand out candy safely. For details about this event and to register your trunk, visit bikersbuildingbridges.com. The Juno Beach Centre is Canada's only museum in Normandy dedicated to honouring the contributions of 1.1 million men and women who served during World War II. This year, support a worthy cause and take part in the Remembrance Day races being held until November 28th. You can register for one of 3 virtual race distances, each with its own special meaning. Participants will receive a race kit that includes a commemorative medal, a Juno Beach collector coin, a bracelet, and more. For details and to register, visit junobeach.org. Bring your lunch and enjoy beautiful live music at the same time. Come out November 6th to the first Friday Lunch and Listen concert series featuring performances by the University of Lethbridge Conservatory of Music in Cass's Community Room beginning 12:15 p.m. and ending at 1. First Friday events are an initiative brought to you by the Heart of Our City Committee. For a full listing of upcoming events, visit firstfridaylethbridge.com. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
According to a White House physician, U.S. President Donald Trump has tested negative for the novel coronavirus on consecutive days. In fact, Dr. Sean Conley says the president is not infectious to others. To discuss this in more detail is U.S. journalist Lisa Daftari joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, that was a pretty quick recovery for the U.S. president.
Extremely quick. Everyone is, on both sides. Everything in this country is political. I'm sure you guys, have kind of figured that out at this point. But any opinion, anything is just political. So right now, the naysayers are saying, we don't believe the doctors, or we won't believe this doctor, or we're going to wait for the White House doctor, or it's a photo op, or whatever it may be. But it was very quick, and thankfully, both the president and his wife are doing well. We have reports that those who are in or around the White House who contracted the virus are all doing pretty well. The reason this came out is because the president is gearing up to go back to business as usual and to attend the rallies, to attend the events, and of course, to lead up to participate in the next presidential debate. So we have the doctors okay, and let's see if the media and the left leaves him alone.
Lisa, Republicans are looking to install Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. She appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee earlier this week. Now, Barrett took no questions, but instead had to sit through hours upon hours of opening statement by the 22 members of the committee. And during that time, both the Democrats and Republicans took lots of shots at each other.
It was basically a referendum against the president from the Democrats and defending the president from the Republicans. And, I kind of feel sorry for Amy Coney Barrett because she, is basically in the crosshairs of this political infighting between the left and the right. But to her credit, she's perfectly capable of fending for herself, and her record, her personal life, everything about her is so incredibly impeccable. I think that she's won over a lot of the Democrats, although they may not admit it. She's been doing very well. She knows, the Constitution backwards and forwards. She's done tremendously well in her career, in her professional life, in her family life, as a mother, as a lawyer, as a judge. So it's sad. It's sad to see someone so highly qualified have to sit there and to have to take the brunt for both sides just taking shots at each other. And it's true that we're only a few weeks away from the election, but we are months away from the exchange of power, when one president may be leaving or maybe going into a second term. So I think a lot of this, again, it's just the political game that we've been playing for 4 years now. I think I remind everyone that this is not just an election year. We've had 4 years of a contested presidency, really, by the left, by the media in this country. So we've had it pretty bad, but 2020 definitely takes the cake.
The Vatican came under fire this week for moving to renew a deal with the Chinese Communist Party. Officials say they're moving forward with cutting a deal with Beijing over the appointment of bishops. Now, Lisa, wouldn't these bishops just preach Chinese government propaganda?
Yeah, this is the first time in my lifetime or career as a journalist where the Vatican has come under fire so many times for making decisions that are somewhat not in the realm of what the Vatican should do or what it stands for. We have so much evidence to suggest that China is up to no good. Whether you look at their human rights violations, whether you look at how they treat their children, their minorities, whether you look at what they're doing to their neighbors, what they're attempting to do to Taiwan rather, and Hong Kong, etc. It's not good, particularly in light of what's going on globally with the coronavirus and their lack of transparency and rejecting to really answer questions, etc. So anyway, the cards are stacked against China from the rest of the world. Meanwhile, the Vatican feels okay to cozy up to them. And as you said, wouldn't they be required to become the mouthpiece of the Chinese government? So yes, they're being called out once again by large world powers, including the US and many others, for making this move.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what kind of a message these bishops would preach during Mass instead of giving glory to God, our Heavenly Father, talking about Jesus' saving grace. It's like Xi Jinping, like giving glory to him. I mean, it's just kind of a bizarre scenario. Now, Lisa, a new video has surfaced showing that China is threatening to invade Taiwan as the communist nation is showing its military might.
Right, Hal, speaking of Chinese propaganda, this video is exactly that. It explains exactly what they're trying to do, and always looking forward. We're in the game of chess. We might not even know it, but checkmate, and that's what the Chinese are doing. They're moving on to the next step, and regionally, their goal is to expand their power, and they made this video chest thumping and showing their military might, but also having a man confess that he was the one who showed the footage of the military, and basically it's also sending a symbol or a warning, I should say, to others that this is what will happen to you. Not only will you be arrested and held in custody by China, but you will have to confess, you will be humiliated, and it's not going to end well for you. So this is speaking to all of those protesters in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, anywhere in the world, Australia also standing up to the Chinese government. So anyone who is looking to fight the Chinese government, here they are, thumping their chests one more time and saying this is what we are up to.
Lisa, despite a ceasefire last Saturday, Armenia and Azerbaijan have reported recent attacks. Apparently, there's been intensive shelling on the southern front. Civilians and churches are now under fire and are at risk.
Yeah, it's so sad. It's so sad because the ceasefire hardly lasted, 24 hours, and both sides are blaming one another for breaking the ceasefire, breaking the deal. And yes, the fighting continues. It's horrific. I've spoken to a lot of people on the ground there, and they're very sad. I've also seen the protests here in the United States with a lot of Armenian Americans protesting and asking for help and support in this fight. More than anything, it's what you've just read about, the report about churches and very, very historic landmarks being targeted. I mean, is nothing sacred anymore. This is a discrepancy over what they are calling occupied land. Of course, we've seen this all throughout the Middle East, but in this case, this is something that's it's relatively new. There was a ceasefire in place. I mean, can't they resolve this using diplomatic means rather than going after, again, churches churches, civilian areas, civilians, children, people who are going to worship, etc.
Like you mentioned, there are rallies all across the United States, including in your city in Los Angeles, where thousands of protesters gathered outside of the Turkish consulate, which is backing Azerbaijan.
Right. So it's very, very interesting, not surprising that the Armenians here and everywhere else are calling on Turkey because they know that Turkey has skin in the game. Turkey only gets involved in geopolitical matters where it has, an axe to grind. So in Syria, they got involved because they wanted to see an end to the Kurds, and they only wanted to have access to the areas where the Kurds were fighting because they wanted to kill the Kurds. And in this case, they are taking the side of Azerbaijan because they have a long history with the Armenians, actually a genocide, as most would call it. So yes, the protesters here gathered in front of the Turkish consulate in order to call upon them to withdraw, to stop the fighting, to stop importing fighters from Syria. These are brutal insurgents that they are importing in order to fight against them. And all around Los Angeles, I drove into Glendale, which is it's a city where it's little Armenia basically here in Los Angeles, and so many Armenian flags on cars, on businesses, and people who are coming out to show support for Armenia.
The U.S. bomber fleet has been flexing its military muscles. More bombers have been seen flying closer and closer to sensitive areas over Europe and the Pacific. Are those flights meant to maybe send a message to both Moscow and Beijing?
Absolutely. It's U.S. under President Trump is still looking to exert its leadership and to be the number one world power. And although that may not look like it's the case right now, particularly with the infighting going on in the United States, particularly with everything going on with China, with Russia, with everyone doing their own thing, with rogue nations basically doing their own thing and marching to their own. This is a sign and a warning from the U.S. to say, look, we're still here. We still have the military might. I think it's an important sign, and it's an important, symbolic gesture to say that we've still got it. We'll come out and show that despite what's going on in Washington, D.C.
Now, the World Health Organization is warning against more COVID-19 lockdowns, which could cause severe economic damage as the world tries to recover from the first wave of the virus, Lisa.
Yeah, well, a little too late, right? World Health Organization is kind of playing both sides here. On the one hand, they suggested that everyone shut down, that we call this a pandemic, that we react or overreact, as some would say, to the virus in one way. And now they are saying, look at the side effects. Well, nobody looked at the price we had to pay to shut down the way that we did. And now they're saying, oh, wait a minute, there are side effects. People have lost their lives, not because of the virus, but because they've committed suicide, because they cannot financially keep up with the pressures and the demands of their life and their business and their families. So it's very important, even now, months into this, to look in and see both sides of the story.
Now, the WHO also warned against suggestions of letting COVID-19 spread in the hopes of achieving so-called herd immunity, Lisa. The group's chief says, that would be unethical.
Well, there you have it. I mean, is the WHO even relevant anymore? They are saying, on the one hand, this is causing a lot of unintended, perhaps, side effects. And on the other hand, we can't open up society to allow herd immunity to make us stronger. We have to keep ourselves shut down. And what's going to happen? Look, regardless, whenever we open up, we are going to have a bit of a surge. That's just the way it is. You're going to have people in close proximity, and you're going to have some numbers that are going to rise. But that is all in an effort to go back to life as we knew it. This is the only way out at this point.
Lisa, some experts are now saying that some of the novel coronavirus numbers are actually artificially inflated, that, the millions of people around the world who've died, maybe they had existing heart conditions or maybe some other underlying health issues, and they didn't actually die from COVID-19. But what are you hearing in the United States where the COVID-19 virus it's been a huge pandemic where you are?
Sure, yes. Well, the second surge the numbers are actually staying pretty low in some of the hot spots that we had, the New York tri-state area, California, Florida that saw a second surge. Those were lower than expected, but yet we still had a second surge. But yes, I think the number or the statistic, I should say, for those who contracted the virus without any pre-existing conditions and died from it are very low. So when you take that into consideration, well, how many of these individuals would have died if they had contracted the flu or something similar to that? These are numbers that have to be put side by side. And then you want to look at the numbers of the people who committed suicide, the people who, contracted something else, but then they either couldn't get to the hospital or delayed going to the hospital because of COVID. It's just a long list of numbers and nuances to look at with regards to what the real damage from COVID has been. And then you look at the hospitals themselves. I mean, people talk about how there's different funding or different insurance payments given to those who died from COVID, and the treatments given for COVID or being put on a respirator versus dying from a heart attack or stroke or diabetes or whatever the underlying condition may have been. So we have to look at the economic aspect of it as well. A lot to claw through, a lot to go over. I mean, it's just.
You're right. It's not just the physical ailments. It's as well the mental health people have, the spiritual health, economic. I mean, it shut down so many economies. You're absolutely right. It's impacted everywhere. Now, here's an interesting way of combating the novel coronavirus. New government guidelines in Germany call for windows to be fully opened every 20 minutes to battle the spread of COVID-19.
Yes, they've asked school children to dress warmly and bring a blanket to school because the windows will be open to combat COVID-19. I mean, look, this is one way to do it. Some schools here are or have said that they will teach outside because the climate is nice and it's nice all year round. Obviously, outside it's less of an issue, even though some experts warn that you have to even wear a mask outside. There's also a story about, there's a classroom full of children who contracted strep from each other. And now the school closed down or that class perhaps closed down. Here in the United States, this is an interesting, statistic to look at as well, that things do spread. There's flu season, kids get sick. Another way of doing it is opening all the windows, teaching outside. It's going to be a while before we figure this all out, but here in Los Angeles, the schools are still closed. They are, doing Zoom classes or pods where it's 3 or 4 children and that's all. But again, the side effects of these children not going to school, not interacting with one another, the psychological side effects of not being around other children and then having to go back to school next year or next semester, whenever that will be. But again, major changes in the lives of most people around the world during this pandemic.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
As Christians, most of us are familiar with evangelistic outreaches, but could you imagine a 4-day Christian event taking place simultaneously across the entire African continent? The numbers would be staggering. To chit-chat a bit about it is Jennifer Wild. She's president of the group One God, One Day, One Africa. Jen joins us from Florida. Welcome to BCN.
Thank you so much, Hal, for having me. It's a blessing and an honor to be here.
Oh, that's awesome. Good to have you here. So tell me a bit about this event. What is it all about?
Well, it's actually the largest Christian outreach in history. Nothing like this has ever been done, ever attempted. People have covered countries a lot of times here and there, but nobody has ever actually done an entire continent of anywhere yet. So this is the entire continent of Africa, and we are partnering with many churches, ministries, evangelists, pastors all over the world. Actually, they adopt a country, one country. There's 54 countries in Africa. We'll be in as many live as possible with miracle festivals. So these will be outreaches where a church adopts, say, Kenya. And that church, the pastor or the evangelist or the head of the missionary agency will go over there, preach the gospel, hold a miracle festival for 3 to 5 days. I know you said 4 days, so it's 3 to 5 days, whatever they would like. And that will be live streamed TV and radio to that country while they're doing it on those 4 nights, day 4. But on the last night, all across, so we'll be having these live miracle festivals in every country simultaneously on these nights. And on the last one, we will live stream TV, radio from 4 different locations around Africa, north, south, east, west, and about 15 minutes apiece or whatever across the entire continent. Hence, one God, one day, one Africa.
Now, Jennifer, I understand that this event arose from a vision you received all the way back in 1980. Tell me a bit more about that.
I was living in Hollywood. I was an actress and a model. I was completely lost. I didn't know anything about God, had never set foot in church. And one day I was at a big Hollywood party, and my best friend, who was married to the top movie star of the day, who won the Golden Globe Awards that year, he was actually a heroin addict. He came out, he threw a piece of paper at me when I was leaving, and I was always, there was always a hole in my heart. I was always, and I didn't know anything about God or Jesus. I had never set foot in a church, came from a wealthy family, had everything, but I was completely lost. And he said, "Here, Jennifer, maybe this will do you some good." He was Italian. He threw it at me, a tract. I'll never forget it. It was David Wilkerson, and it said, "The two of me, the struggle with sin." And, you know, I said, "Very funny, Ray." I went home. I put it in my pocket the next day after being hungover and doing drugs and the whole thing. Back then, everybody was. It was horrible, a horrible time. But, you know, I pulled it out, and it said the struggle with sin. And it was strange how, because I knew I had sin a lot, but I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. So I opened it and I started reading that, and it talked about heaven and hell and God and Jesus, and that you would live forever for eternity. And, you know, it said that it's your choice where you're going to go, heaven or hell, and you pick. And it said, all you have to do is believe and receive Jesus as your Lord and Savior and be sorry for your sins. That's it. That's all you have to do. And you will be in heaven for eternity. And it was like, wow, that's all I have to do. And I thought, you know what? What if this is true? What if all these millions of Christians around the world are right, and there is a heaven and hell, we do live forever? Well, it scared me to death. I knew I was on my way to hell, and I did not want to go there. No way, no how. And so it said, say this little prayer at the end: receive Jesus, accept him into your heart, be sorry for your sins. I said, okay, I'm sorry for the bad things I've done. And I received him, and he completely changed my life.
So Jennifer, as you began to share your vision with leaders all the way around the world, what are some of the responses you received to it?
Well, I really didn't share with a lot of people. God kind of took this whole thing. Back then, when I became a Christian, how this came about, he gave me a vision. And it was a vision of multi millions of people, as far as the eye could see, receiving Jesus as their Lord and Savior all at one time. And you know, back then there was no internet, no phone, no nothing. It was impossible to do something like that. But I just believed him. I just believed everything, and I said, okay, you know, I started praying about it. And when I started making these calls, I had been a missionary in Mexico for 10 years, living out in the dirt and the trash with my kids. I didn't know anyone. I didn't do the circuit. I didn't I didn't know anything or anyone. And when God said a few years ago, now is the time to do this, I just, through circumstances, a series, he led me to Siegfried Tomaszewski, who was actually Reinhard Bonnke's CEO in Africa and Europe for many, 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 many years. I believe that nobody else in the world could do this except Siegfried. And when I talked to him about it, you asked what was the response. I got his name and number. Someone told me about him. They said, call him. I did, and he hung up on me. And I called him back and I said, I said, we lost the connection. And he said, no, we didn't. I hung up on you. And I said, what? Why? And he said, because it's crazy. I've never heard of anything like this. It's overwhelming. It's too big. And I said, well, you know what? God is that big. God can do anything. Don't you believe that? And he goes, okay, I'll pray about it. And the rest is history. He prayed about it.
Originally supposed to take place in May, but now with the global COVID-19 pandemic, it has been rescheduled to November 12th through the 15th. Where exactly is it going to be taking place, and how many countries and people are participating? It's huge.
Oh my goodness. As of now, we have almost every country that we can get in covered. So ministries almost, I think there's, I don't know, I don't keep up on the exact numbers. I think it's 48 out of the 54 countries we can get in. Places like Syria, we can't. You know, North Africa, it's hard in some places. But ministries have adopted a country, so they're covered. They're raising the money, these ministries, to go over and preach the gospel at that time. We are the organizers. We're putting everything together. So we give them a boots on the ground person over there if they need it. A lot of these ministries have been working over in Africa for years. They don't need our help in that way, but some do. And then we put them together with a person who knows the government officials, all the churches and pastors, all the deacon, all the people, the media, everyone that they need to know to get this done in that country.
How do you actually go about setting up an event this large? I mean, there's a lot of things you have to consider, such as security, bathrooms, water, a solid sound system at each venue.
Absolutely. And these are done individually. They're all done at the in the countries by whoever is doing the organizing for that ministry, or if the ministry itself is organizing it with just pastors and locals and the government officials and this kind of thing. They do that. So yes, everyone has a crusade director, and those crusade directors do everything that they need to do, from all that you just said, security to everything. They're huge. It's a huge ordeal just to have one of these done in one country.
So Jennifer, what's your main goal now with One God, One Day, One Africa?
Our main goal is to see the entire continent of Africa saved, healed, delivered, set free, filled with the Holy Spirit, and following Jesus, knowing him, and surrendered and sacrificing their lives to Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. From the tiniest villages to the biggest cities, everyone, everywhere.
And you believe that God is endorsing this event, that his hand is really upon this. Do you have any testimonies or stories you'd like to share along those lines?
Oh boy, there's so many, Hal, that he's done.
Just give me one.
One. Well, the main one I just told you is about getting Siegfried, the only person in the world, on board with this. But then since then, people like Heidi Baker, Reinhard Bonnke, his successor, Daniel Kalinda, who is the head of Christ for All Nations, people like that, Youth with a Mission. We have the top Wycliffe Bible translators. Everybody is on board with this. Saddleback Church, I mean, you name it, everybody's on board. Every denomination, Christian denomination, including Catholics, Baptists, non-denominational. It's about unity, and I think that's why God is endorsing this, because he's bringing everybody together, which we should have been together the whole time, but everybody's been kind of doing their own thing since the Lord
Are there going
came.
to be crusades happening in each nation in the days leading up to the event?
The event are the days. So the crusade are the events, the 3 to 5 days, and then the last day, like we said, is where it will be live streamed on that one day from 4 different areas. But the events are the live 3 to 5 days in every country on the same weekend, in the second weekend of November, like you said.
How can viewers get involved with One God, One Day, One Africa? Jennifer?
Well, they can go to our website. That's the main thing, and that's www.1GDAGodDayAfrica.org. and sign up. And we have a couple of spots left to adopt a country for larger churches or whoever would like to do that, evangelists, missionaries, whatever. But there's so many ways to get involved. Prayer is so important, Hal. We beg people, please, please. It's the most number one important thing that you can do is pray for this. And that's how we partner with God. And of course, we always need more funds. Everybody does, but and then people can come. We invite every single person to get involved. If they would like to come to one of the countries and be involved, boots on the ground during the event, they can be in a prayer team. There's all different ways to get involved. Many different ways to be there in November with us.
So Jennifer, after the event wraps up, it doesn't end there. Let's talk about the plan to plant some churches and disciple new believers.
Absolutely. That is so important. And we are partnering with people like Saddleback Church, who has, I think they have 10 to 20 countries in Africa right now where they're doing follow-up. We, of course, have our own follow-up booklets that we will be passing out.
So Jennifer, it's One God, One Day, One Africa. How about potentially in the future doing One God, One Day, One America? So all of the Americas, North, Central America, South America, and then maybe someday down the road doing all of Europe. How about that too?
That is so funny you said that, Hal, because everybody's saying that. People are saying, okay, when this is done, what's next? If the Lord tarries, it's in God's hands. We're available as long as we have breath. We will be serving the Lord, doing whatever He calls us to do. And that's absolutely, we're talking about it, possibly South America, Central America next, Europe, possibly, like you said, and next. We don't know. But we'll be in ministry until the Lord comes back.
And when you do one in Australia, New Zealand, let me know. I'll join you for that one.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm excited for that too.
Jennifer Weil, president of One God, One Day, One Africa. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Hal, and God bless you and God bless everyone. Please join us.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. As you said, God bless, and thanks so much for joining us.